From Inform a Tech Target, I'm David Essex, and this is Enterprise Apps Unpacked. AI is starting to transform almost every part of business, and corporate learning and development are certainly no exception. Generative AI's ability to produce text and images in seconds has been a force multiplier, enabling L&D and HR departments to scale up customized on-demand learning content that employees can access when they need it in the form that suits their individual learning styles. That's been going on for almost 3 years now. Josh Bersin says the new trend transforming workplace learning is employees' use of AI-powered search to get answers to their questions and learn in an even more organic way. Bersin is probably the most prominent analyst in HR technology. He led product strategy at companies that developed e-learning platforms before founding his own research and advisory firm, Bersin & Associates, in 2004. He worked for several years at Deloitte after it acquired the firm, and then in 2019 founded the Josh Bersin Academy to provide professional development to HR practitioners. And 2 years ago, he introduced an AI assistant called Galileo that acts like an HR advisor and trainer, drawing on the years of content produced by the consulting firms. Bersin is often among the first to spot emerging trends in HR software and the underlying people issues that drive the demand for these technical solutions. So I was eager to hear more about his claim that AI-driven search is actually transforming workplace learning. In the podcast, we discussed the evidence, what he's discovered from his own experience offering AI-based learning, and how this trend could change long-standing training practices as well as legacy technology, especially learning management systems. We also discussed how AI-powered search could help alleviate workers' fears about being replaced by AI. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Enterprise Apps Unpacked for the real story on the software that runs your business. Josh, it's great to see you again. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Sure.
You've recently been making the case that AI-powered search is changing how employees learn, which is in turn transforming corporate learning from a top-down content delivery model to a user enablement model. Can you explain why you think that?
That was a very well-worded question because that's exactly what we're trying to say. The history of corporate training is the pedagogy of the classroom, where a teacher or an instructor or an expert teaches somebody chapter by chapter a set of materials that might have to do with a job or a topic or a skill or a technology. And then the employee goes through this series of steps, finishes this thing called a course, and supposedly goes to work and uses it. The problem, of course, is it wastes a lot of their time. It's not personalized. You can't ask questions online very well, if at all, unless you're in a real classroom. And it's expensive to build. It's expensive to maintain. You can't translate it into multiple languages. And everybody kind of wants to learn different things at different points in time. So if you flip that and say, let's make the learning experience completely personalized, let's load the content into a platform, an AI native platform that can generate instructional formats automatically, let the user ask questions as needed and learn in the flow of work, the consumption can go up by, I think, 2 orders of magnitude. And the evidence that I have of that is if you look at all the 20 years of experience we've had with e-learning since the beginning of the internet and how much consumption's happened, ChatGPT probably created 100 times more consumption in 1 year of content than all of those courses ever created because it was so easy to use. And at work, we're not in a classroom, we're not in school, we're learning things as we need them. And sometimes we want a little bit of extra material and want to dig in, but a lot of times we're just trying to familiarize ourselves or inform ourselves with topics that have to do with a problem or a challenge or a new case or a new situation. This dynamic learning technology that allows people to learn in that fashion is going to distribute the learning out to where it's needed in the lines of business and the departments and the divisions and the plants and the stores and so forth, where people are actually doing their jobs. And it's going to take the L&D function in corporate or wherever it may be, and it's going to shrink it. because there won't be as much formalized instructional design needed.
So, are you seeing some evidence of this shift among your own clients?
Yeah. It's very new, but we probably have 20 clients doing it right now. Travelers Insurance is doing it. We have an airline we just worked with that's building a whole new academy on this. Bristol Myers Squibb is doing it. A whole bunch of small companies we were working with are doing it. And they're taking their giant corpus of training courses, and they're either loading it into this new system to turn it into more dynamic content, or they're keeping the compliance courses in the old LMS because they have to be tracked and administered through compliance processes. But then, and they're putting all their new content into this new type of a system. And what's cool about it is you don't have to wait for an instructional designer or an expert to author something. You can literally tape record or interview an expert and say, hey, how did you deal with this problem? Or tell us what you've learned about this, and how do you design such and such, and what are some of the problems that people will run into when they do this? And you can literally take those recordings and put them into the system, and the next 5 minutes later, everybody can learn from that.
Mhm. And is that because of like the usual like searchability and the indexing capabilities and like the automatic
It's because of AI.
transcriptions?
It's
Mhm.
more than that. It's not just searching. Is because what it does is it's taking all of that content in words or graphical images, it's putting it into an AI corpus, and it's allowing the user to interrogate it or ask questions of it or generate content from it, just like the way ChatGPT manages all the corpus of knowledge on the internet. So it wasn't really possible to do this until we had this AI kinds of technology that we have now in the last 2 or 3 years. A search engine is part of the problem. That's the search, the RAG part of AI, but the generation part and the LLM and the training part, the reasoning model, is a big part of this. Because you can, for example, I just did a demo for somebody yesterday. Somebody, I pulled up a course we have on well-being at Cadbury, which is a UK company that's been around a long time. And I said, I went into the course and I just went into the tutor. I didn't even go into the course. And I said, who is Cadbury? What is their experience with well-being? What's the history of their program? How successful is it? What did it do to their leadership? I just asked it a bunch of questions, and I didn't have to go through the course at all. It just answered all these questions with the references to source material.
So your company, the Josh Bersin company, has an offering in the AI space called Galileo,
Right.
which, as I understand it, it's an AI assistant and kind of a consultant that specializes in HR. Have you noticed anything about how clients are using Galileo that has informed your research and your observations
Oh,
about
yeah, we
this
have.
trend towards AI-driven search?
Yes, we don't monitor what people are doing with it, but our provider sends us reports that summarize the kinds of queries and interactions people are using it for. And we have about something like 6 or 7,000 people using it right now in probably 500 different companies. So it's a whole range of things. There's about 20 or 30 big use cases. But it's everything from job design, recruiting questions on how to recruit, what are the skills that are available or needed in a particular domain? How do I build a development plan for somebody who's underperforming? What is a good way of coaching a leader that has these kinds of problems? How do we develop an onboarding program? How do we build a skills taxonomy? Who are the vendors that would be best suited for this kind of a technology solution? Because we have a bunch of vendor information in there. Is our turnover too high relative to benchmarks? Is our turnover too low? What should the span of control of our group be? How do I set goals for my employees? Are these good goals? We're now reaching the point where people are loading meeting recordings from interviews or meeting recordings from meetings and asking Galileo to assess what it thinks the skills are of the people that have been talking and speaking in these meetings. And it does a pretty good job of that. So it's really a consultant, assistant, mentor, coach all in one.
Mhm. I'm curious about how the adoption of generative AI by the search providers, the big ones, especially Google and
Oh,
Microsoft. Yeah, and they're also major players in AI development now. How that is that affecting the trend? Is it helping it along this workplace learning trend that you've identified?
no, only to the degree that those tools make it into corporate America or corporations. The Google AI assistant that comes up when you search is good for them. You can't use that inside of a company. So what you want is that experience inside of your company. That's what Galileo does. Galileo can also search the external internet too. So you can flip a switch and look at the outside information if you want. And then you don't get proliferated with ads like you do in Google. So I think those are tools for the B2C interfaces that Google makes money on in ads. And they'll probably put ads into those AI responses, and then they're going to be a little bit less interesting, just like what happened to everything else. We don't have to monetize our product that way because companies buy it and they use it for their own uses. So we don't have any ads. We don't have any reason to have any ads in there. So it's going to be even better for inside of companies.
Is there any difference in the answer to that question if we focus just on the companies that, as I understand it, really only focus on developing generative AI, like OpenAI and Anthropic, then and also these major search engine companies? Is there any difference with what they're doing to further?
David, it comes down to their business model. What OpenAI and Anthropic are doing now, and I think this is the most logical thing for them to do, is to license their technology to corporations to build search and agent experiences inside of those companies, not to take the monetization of consumers and apply that to corporations. Because 99% of the companies I talk to do not want their employees putting company information in the consumer search agent. Because if I'm in General Electric or L'Oreal and I start asking L'Oreal related questions, if I upload a file that's the L'Oreal salary structure or a L'Oreal product guide of something, and I start asking questions about it, we don't know if OpenAI isn't keeping that information and storing it. So nobody wants their employees to do that. So they're as quickly as possible trying to use systems inside the company to do this. So we have different business models for the consumer businesses of these big vendors and the corporate businesses.
Mhm. This might be a good place to jump ahead and ask about the corporate L&D systems and how they need to change just to accommodate this shift. You've already talked about it a bit with the internal searching and trying to keep your corporate information private. For example, should companies that want to do this be developing their own large language models?
No, they don't have to. So the legacy technology that's going to fall away is what's called the learning management system. The LMS has been pushed about as far as we can push it. It doesn't do knowledge management. It doesn't do AI content generation. It doesn't do translation. It doesn't really understand the content that it's hosting. So those systems are going to be replaced by these AI content generation systems. And I think over time that these AI platforms like Galileo are going to be not just training systems, but really enablement tools. So, I could put a standard operating procedure or a checklist or a safety guide into Galileo. And then when somebody says, how do I do such and such? It will teach me the safety things I need to know and teach me how to do that process all in one. So the systems that are going to probably fall away over time are these learning management systems that are about 30 years old. I got involved in the learning management systems business in 1998 when I was starting, and it's played out. And this is going to be very disruptive that AI is going to replace a significant amount of that technology.
Since you mentioned LMSs, maybe focus on that for a minute. You say that's what's going to happen, but what about now? Is there anything companies should do now? Should they be looking to retire them already or just?
No, you can't retire it because a lot of these things have very mission critical compliance programs in them. But what we work on with BMS and Travelers and these other companies is you bring in an AI platform and you build new content into there. And then you take the content in the LMS and you stick it. We took all of the content we built for 8 years in our traditional learning platform called the Josh Person Academy. We moved it into Galileo Learn in 4.5 months. It didn't take that long. So we shut off our old academy. Now, a big company probably can't do that because they have a lot of compliance things in the LMS, but you can pull things out of it and then launch it to the employees in different stages of content. And eventually, the LMS will be nothing but a compliance platform, invisible under the covers. And someday that'll probably get loaded into AI too. And so the immediate thing to do is start playing with a tool like Galileo Learn and understand its power And every company will find use cases they can start with like immediately because it's so fast to build and enable content. And it's interesting for the users because the employees now can get a personalized experience in a chatbot or on a web page that's immediately relevant to what they want to do, that the consumption will go up so fast that people are going to say, what about this? Why don't we put that in there? And let's put this in there. And it just
Mhm.
grows.
So, what about other kinds of locations for data, like just corporate databases, unstructured, structured, maybe an Oracle database, or even if they had a
Yeah.
knowledge management systems, which is a term we've used off and on over the
Yeah.
decades. Do they need to do anything different with those to accommodate this new way of learning?
I think at some point, the knowledge management systems, quote unquote, which are document management search engines, will probably merge with this other form. The vendors that are creating AI powered learning are very similar to the vendors that are creating AI powered knowledge management. They tend to be different buyers. Usually, the learning tools are purchased by HR or learning people, and the knowledge management tools are usually purchased by IT. And so those have been two different markets. But once these companies see that the two technologies are so similar, I think they're going to want to bring them together. The reason is that we don't want to give employees five places to go. We want to give them one chat bot to find anything they need to do in their company. They might simply want to ask it a compliance question or a question about their payroll or their 401k or something. And then they might say, how do I learn about such and such? Or how do I turn this device on? Or how do I secure my password? Or how do I X? That's a learning question. And so that chatbot should be able to access this corpus of learning and answer it. Now, Galileo is designed to do that. Galileo has an agent and a learning server all built in. But I think that's where this will go fairly quickly because most of the companies that create knowledge assistance for employees tell me that within a few months they put more and more into there because the employees know where to go. That's the problem with the learning platforms is the learning platforms are buried in the corporate portals in most companies. They're hard to find, and then you get into it, it's hard to find the right information that you needed. All of a sudden that can be available in a single location. And going back to my comment about ChatGPT, I think the sort of answer is in that people would rather chat than click through pages and try to find courses. Occasionally they'll look for courses, but maybe that's 1 out of 20 times.
Mhm. Now, for a number of years, you've been talking about how companies could and we're already starting to use generative AI to automate content creation for the learning systems. This goes, I think, back to November 2022, and then building the following year or so. And you recommended it, I think, and advised people to that was the big opportunity. How about now, though, with this evidence that you're seeing of people really learning, employees really learning with AI-driven search? Is there anything that companies now need to do different about the type of content? I think you've talked about it quite a bit
Yeah.
already, but I'm wondering if
So
you
I
can
think
say
that's the
more.
interesting. I think that's a little bit of an area of research. What format is going to be the most useful to the most people? Sometimes I want a video. Sometimes I want an avatar to talk to. Sometimes I want a coach to ask questions just by voice. Sometimes I want a video simulation. I think the way AI works is the user is going to have a lot of options, and the user could say, show me a picture of that. Show me a diagram of that. Give me a 5-minute podcast on that. Galileo has all those kinds of features. There's actually interfaces that are voice where the system asks you questions. Like the best way to learn actually is for the teacher to be asking you questions to get you engaged as opposed to you just consuming things. Companies are going to have all these options. AI can handle almost all of this. And most of the platforms are evolving to the point where they have lots of modalities like that. Not everybody does every part of it, but Galileo does most of those modalities. And I think that's where L&D and HR people can do more research and study. Our salespeople don't want to look at anything. They just want to talk to this thing over the phone because they're too busy. Our manufacturing people want to see pictures. Our executives want to see talking heads of other executives. I don't know.
Mhm. You have this talent for giving me my segue. So I wanted to ask about what the L&D and HR managers should do differently, including perhaps changing their own mindsets, and maybe they need new skill sets because it's an organizational and a sort of managerial and philosophical change. It sounds like.
It's not going to be as difficult as people think. Once you get your first of all, L&D people tend to be hands-on, design-oriented technologists anyway. Most of them like to play with new tools. Look at how fast they've learned how to use virtual classrooms and things like that. So, if you give yourself access to systems like Galileo Learn and you just learn how to use them yourself, like learning how to use a spreadsheet or learning how to use everything else, most instructional people will immediately see opportunities to change what they're doing. If, however, there are people that have this religious bias that we have to build courses, they have to be instructionally rigorous, they have to have assessment, they have to do it this way, they have to do simulations, I think those people are going to have to test their assumptions. Some learning experiences demand rigorous, high fidelity learning, but I would say that's maybe 10 or 15% that are very high stakes situations where somebody might be operating a very difficult system that might break or hurt somebody. A lot of learning experiences don't have to be like that. So I think a lot of the skills, quote unquote, that are needed from L&D and HR people are experimenting with these tools and relearning what is going to work best in different modalities in different parts of their company. And I think it's going to be probably a smaller number of people doing that because the AI is so scalable. There will be people that are going to have to analyze the data to look at what people are doing. There are going to be people that are going to want to build color templates and beautiful graphics. There's still stuff that people have to do here. These systems can't do everything by themselves. You have to teach them what you want. But I think the general size of the L&D instructional design community is going to get smaller, to be honest.
Mhm. Speaking of potential job loss, there's ongoing concern among white collar workers that generative AI and agentic AI could make their jobs obsolete, at least part of their jobs. And there seem to be two popular answers to this that I hear the most. Training people to stay ahead of the AI curve by learning how to use it in ways that are complementary to them, that also give them the skills to thrive in what is obviously going to be an AI centric future. And we're already there, I think. And or upskilling and reskilling them for new roles, not necessarily AI centric, if their current jobs are being taken over by AI. So I'm wondering, how will this shift to AI powered search based learning maybe help with both of those efforts?
Almost every experience that I've had with AI, and we've used it a lot, and that I've seen with other companies, is there in the beginning, there's this testing and experimentation where you learn how to use it and you figure out if you can trust it. Is it going to do the job I want it to do at the quality level or accuracy that I want? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And so you have to essentially learn how to manage it. Imagine that it was a person that kept making mistakes. And so you have to learn you're teaching yourself and you're teaching it how to do what you want it to do. But then very quickly, the light bulb goes off and you say, wow, I can do stuff with this thing that I never did before. Now, do I want to do more of the same thing? Or do I want to let the AI do more of the same thing and I will work on making the thing better? So if you're a designer and all of a sudden all your video editing is done automatically with an AI video generator, now the question is, what kind of video do I want? What is the scenario or interaction that I want to create that's going to be the most interesting? So I think most of us are going to move up a level in our thinking to a higher level context because we're not going to be bogged down in building the spreadsheet, analyzing it, doing the video editing, learning how to use Photoshop, all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden we're all producers and we're all managers and systemic thinkers.
Right.
So everybody's going to go up that process. And then some people that don't feel comfortable with AI are going to blame it. They're going to say, oh, this thing's no good because it made a mistake. I can't get it to work. Well, it's a non-deterministic technology. It doesn't always answer the same question the same way. So all of us are going to have to learn how to coach and train this thing to do what we want it to do. And at some point, we're going to have to find out what the limits are. Some of these things make mistakes until you learn how to use them right. Some of them make mistakes because they're flawed in certain areas and they just have glitches. So it's a little bit of a new world for all of us. But if you're not using it, if you're not in the game, you're missing out and you're going to be left aside, because this is going to be all over white collar work in every domain, in lawyers and financial analysts and HR people and managers, everybody.
Mhm. Well, that's probably a strong note to end it on, Josh. As always, I appreciate your coming on the podcast.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
Thank you for listening to Enterprise Apps Unpacked, where we give the real story on the software that runs your business. To learn more about business applications, explore our content on searcherp.com. Find us on YouTube at our channel, Eye on Tech. Subscribe to our podcast to receive the latest episodes as they drop. And if you liked what you heard today, give us a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Until next time.
Podcast programming and promotion, production, and quality oversight by Kelsey Waddell. Music supplied by DP via Getty Images. This is an Informa Tech Target production.